Hello, hello. TGIF, happy Friday. My name is Luis Argueta, and today I am sitting here with I'm gonna let you all introduce yourselves. Uh, before we make introductions, I just kind of wanted to give a welcome first to our audience. Welcome everyone who is joining us, and thank you so much for joining us here live. My name is Luis Argueta. I'm the communications director here at Unidos, and I'm really excited to be able to sit down with two community members here from Minneapolis, as well as Unidos Minnesota leaders, to reflect on last night or the mayoral forum that occurred Wednesday evening, where we got to sit down and have a chance to hear from mayoral candidates Dwayne Davis, Omar Fateh, and Jazz Hampton. I want to be clear that from the start, this is just a pure conversation with two residents here of Minneapolis. This is not an endorsement of any candidate, and that this conversation is about what we heard, how it landed, and what it means for our families and our neighborhoods. So let's start with each of us here. I'm just going to have you um, share a little bit about your name. So, first, your name, the neighborhood that you live in, and what originally brought you to the city of Minneapolis. Let's kick it off with Sophie.
My name is Sophie. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Ward 8, which is South Lindale. So I live in the Uptown neighborhood. I moved here about 2 years ago. And I think what was really appealing to me about Minneapolis is like just the ability to not ride my car everywhere. So there's a ton of public transit. I thought the lakes were beautiful, and having the wilderness in our backyard was just something that, for me, just kind of sold the deal. I moved from Iowa, from Des Moines, so for me, this was like it wasn't culturally a huge move, but it was definitely something that I had been thinking about for a long time. I just wanted more access to public transit and just wanted to be out in the wilderness and enjoy the lakes.
I love it. And I mean, and again, I think oftentimes we forget just because we're in the Twin Cities doesn't mean that we don't see a lot of green. I mean, kudos and shout out to Minneapolis Parks and Rec. I mean, really, from what I've heard, Minneapolis consistently lands in the top five for like best parks in the nation. So obviously, we're doing something right there. And then I will kick it off to Callie.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. I'm Callie. I actually was born at HCMC in downtown Minneapolis. And I grew up in Columbia Heights, which is just north of Minneapolis. And spent some time in Ward 8 as a renter and now own in Ward 12. So wasn't that it? I guess it attracted me to stay here as an adult for a lot of the reasons that Sophie just described, the access to nature and the transit systems that I've been able to use ever since I was a kid, and that my family and friends are here as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. I when I came to Minnesota with my family from California, we first landed in Columbia Heights. So when you said Columbia Heights, I was like, I know Columbia Heights. And our first home was Columbia Heights. We purchased a home there for a good 5 years. So, I mean, I know just how creative a suburb that is. Just for Northeast, and it's no surprise that you stayed in Minneapolis. I mean, it is such a vibrant community. So, as Sophie shared, so let's kick it off before we dive in, because one of the things that I want us to focus on today's show is the two questions that Unidos Minnesota were able to ask. So in this mayoral forum that we had hosted Wednesday, this is a joint collaboration between Unidos Minnesota, Situl Action Fund, and Renters for Transformation. These are brand new C4s that have been created for CETUR, Centro de Trabajadores en la Lucha, and for Inquilinos Unidos, which is also referred to as lovingly as IX. But each organization was able to bring a representative, and each organization was able to have questions answered, including even one member from New Justice Project as well. But so before we jump into the Unidos questions, uh, uh, as we normally do with Unidos meetings, we love to kind of go through pluses and deltas.
Mhm.
But when you heard first from these candidates Wednesday evening, what were some of the gut reactions? What were some pluses that you heard in general from some of these candidates? Um, I'm going to give you just 10 seconds here just to kind of think on it and let me know which of you wants to go first.
I think I can go first.
Okay.
I think obviously Fry wasn't in the mayoral forum. I thought that the, the the candidates that were there were all like happy and excited to be there. First of all, they some of them even stayed afterwards to take questions and talk to people, which I thought was amazing. I felt like they truly wanted to be there and they were present. I was also very happy with the diversity of people that asked the questions. There were people from all sort of like economic backgrounds and races, so I thought that was a very inclusive group of people that were asking those questions. So I thought that was really amazing. And then I will say that Davis has a very charismatic personality. He is very I think he was more about policy, and he was also a little bit more about kind of like using that institutional weight, which I thought that was really interesting. So those were my first impressions of the forum and the candidates.
Fantastic. I agree. I think some of those observations you made, especially I think even on Davis, just a lot of people kind of even went off to say just came off very strong and really leaned into like history and experience.
Totally.
So, yeah, yeah. Allie, what were some of your first impressions? Some pluses.
I would agree with Sophie on all of that, and also say that uh, all three candidates, I think, were did an excellent job of of speaking directly to the questions. We were concerned that we'd get a little bit of a dance around, and there was a little bit of that, but not as much as we expected. So I really appreciated that they did focus on the questions that we posed for the most part. And I agree with Sophie that candidate Davis is extremely charismatic, and Jazz Hampton, uh, he was the last responder in a lot of the questions.
Mhm.
Maybe put him at a disadvantage of sorts. But I also agree that the diversity of the question askers was wonderful, and the topics that they brought to the table were I think very pointed, and was great to hear from the candidates on those issues.
I was really impressed. You're right. I think oftentimes we in these forums we forget not only just what the candidates bring, but I was really impressed with the diversity of the questions and the people that brought those questions because I mean it really represented a number of different areas and industries. I mean we had a restaurant worker, we had labor, we had I mean it really felt really great. What were some so deltas? I'm using jargon here, but so just like pros and cons, we call them pluses and deltas. So what were maybe some things that didn't kind of maybe come off as well, just with impressions? Sophie, I'm going to bring it right back to you.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I just go back to Callie's point. I did feel a little frustrated that some of the answers that we got were sort of a little bit of a dance around. Um, specifically with the immigration question, there was and I know we're going to go back to this topic, but I didn't feel like there was actually any policy that was very clear to me within that question. It was just more so like, yeah, we care about this, and this is what it could look like, but it was not very clear what that meant. I will say that um, to the candidate that didn't stay after, I thought that that was a little bit like, I wish that we could have gotten some more clarification on those dance around questions. Um, and it just kind of felt like I'd wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about that. So I felt like those were some things that I noticed right away. But I will say they all stayed topic, like they all met the time, and I think they were prepared. I think they were prepared for the questions. I almost wonder, like, if they hadn't been, if there was maybe like a pop question, like how that would have maybe changed things a little bit. I'm not sure. It is something I'm kind of curious about, but um, those were my initial kind of thoughts there.
I love it. I love it. And just a reminder to folks tuning in as well, if you haven't had the chance or you weren't able to attend Wednesday night, we did stream the Mayoral Forum, the full 90 minutes. And it's available now on our Facebook and our YouTube channels. You can view it in its entirety. There were some technical mic issues that happened live and on, like, actually, like at the location. So I would just skip the first couple of minutes until you get to the first question, and then Mike situation gets a little better. But Callie, I'm gonna pass it to you. What were some not so great moments, or maybe in your impressions?
Um, hmm. I mean, it's always a concern. The questions need to be very pointed and direct, and um, in order to get clear answers from these politicians who are well versed at kind of dancing around, and kind of telling people what they think they might want to hear. Um, and I do think the way that we organized it, we went Davis, Fateh, Hampton in the first four questions, and then we went Hampton, Fateh, or sorry, Hampton, Fateh, Davis in the last three questions. That did have an impact on things a little bit. It's neither here nor there. But just to say that, when I thought back to some of the answers, they all kind of built on one another in a way. I understand not wanting to repeat what the other person has said, wanting to stand out, wanting to appear different, but that I think that impacted a little bit and we only gave them each 3 minutes, so um, it was pretty structured in that way. I guess I'm kind of ragging on myself and our own structure of it. Yeah.
Which is fair, and that's always good to kind of note, and just kind of also for our end, how do we continue building forums that allow for like the most optimal uh, places for our candidates to fully feel comfortable to you know give their best answers as well, right?
Yeah.
So no, this is good. Let's jump into question one. And before I jump into question one, there is a question that was addressed, and I'm going to address it in Spanish. So hay una pregunta que, ¿por qué no estamos hablando en español? Vamos a hacer este discurso en inglés, y la próxima semana tendremos un discurso en español con el huracán y con el pastor Sergio Amezcua, para poder entonces hablar también directamente y solo en español. Entonces, típicamente siempre hacemos estos shows en español, y nunca, raramente hacemos el show para nuestros miembros también en inglés. So, para lo vamos a hacer en inglés, con promesa de tener otro live en vivo la próxima semana, temprano. Ya tendremos más detalles con fecha y tiempo. So for now, for our English speakers, I essentially said we're going to have a Spanish version of this post mayoral discussion next week with some local hosts, jockeys that have their own stations and networks. But I'm going to go ahead and read off question one, and then I'm going to have Sophie go first because we're going to focus on climate a little. And Callie, if you have any thoughts, I'll allow you some time as well. And then vice versa, we'll have then Callie focus on question two, which focuses on separation ordinances and protecting immigrants. And then, Sophie, if you have any additional thoughts, I'll have you join as well.
Mhm.
But the first question Unidos asked was, in 2023, the city set a goal to cut fossil natural gas pollution 85% by 2035. There's a $10 million climate equity fund, but it's not enough. Would you support raising it to $100 million over 6 years by making polluters pay through the franchise fee? So, Sophie, just an initial, just how did you feel candidates answered or potentially dodged this question?
I felt like it definitely was a dodge moment. A dodge moment. I remember Fateh talked about public transit and the bike lanes and some of that infrastructure, which yes, it helps. Ultimately, the question was, would they support it? Would he support it? I was confused. I didn't really get an answer. I don't think that Davis or Jas Hampton answered that question fully. So long story short, I don't know where they really stood with that. I don't know that they outright answered it. They were speaking about some projects that they had worked on that, again, like they make an impact, of course, but ultimately we that's not enough. And so we really needed a commitment. And I didn't hear that from any of the candidates. I wonder if Callie heard that or anything different from that.
I would, I think that the question had a financial lens to it. And so Davis he answered very financially focused.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fateh kind of touched on that, but also touched on, community programs. He talked about the Phillips Community Garden and things like that. And then Hampton really went into the more kind of human community side of what's necessary. But I agree, none of them really committed to increasing the funds. Talked about the importance of the work that needs to be done, but yeah.
And I think you hit it there, Callie. I think of the candidates, you did mention Davis kind of talked about the financial piece of it, but I think from my recollection, he spoke briefly and said, these programs are put in place, and we should be taking advantage of these programs. I think I would have loved to almost hear like what he meant by that. Does he mean potentially increasing the franchise fees, or what that could look like in terms of then investment for clean energy? No.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
Okay.
I feel like I'm also kind of curious to like, okay, like if there were any things that, any objections to that franchise fee, I'd almost be curious to like, what are those? Like, this is a collaborative space. Like, this is a really great time to explain, yes, I could see this, but here's what we need to work on first. It wasn't a debate. So it was like an open, like, get to know them and understand where they're coming from. And I just didn't really feel like there was any clear indication of like what really is that thing that's holding them back from committing to it. So I was a little disappointed with that answer.
I think oftentimes candidates forget that not every reaction, you don't always have to agree, but sometimes I think people are genuinely curious if there is any hesitation, what is it, so that we can move into lean into those conversations and
Right.
actually have real discourse, real conversation on what the hesitation may be. So I think I really like that observation, Sophie. No, that's fantastic. Uh, are there any final thoughts before we move into um, the separation ordinance and protecting immigrants question?
Not for me, no.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. The second question here that Unidos Minnesota asked was in regards to the separation ordinance and protecting immigrants, and it reads: Minneapolis has a separation ordinance limiting MPD cooperation with ICE, but federal agencies are abusing power. The strong mayor amendment gives the mayor control of MPD. What actions will you take to protect immigrant rights, and what would you do if federal forces came again? So I'm gonna this time I'm gonna have Callie kind of kick us off. But Callie, how did each candidate talk about protecting immigrant neighbors?
Uh, Again, they all almost built off of each other's answers. I feel, um, and Hampton started with the first answer, and I think because the question referenced what happened at Lake and Bloomington on June 3rd, uh, there was focus on that, that as a sort of traumatic event that we all experienced collectively in the community. But Fateh was the only candidate that actually said he would commit to strengthening the separation ordinance, um, and really wanting to confirm that city officials know when there is federal activity that's going to happen. Hampton said as much as well. He wanted to make sure that we knew what the plans were when they were taking place. That our public safety officials should be aware of that. Um, and, given the lack of clarity and visibility around the relationship between local public safety officials and federal agencies and efforts, I honestly don't know if I believe if I agree with that statement. But Fateh did also mention, that if any MPD officer was found to be collaborating with ICE, they would be terminated.
Mhm.
Period. Which um, I
Verbatim, verbatim.
I know that terminating an officer of the MPD is um, easier said than done given the union in place. So I don't know how much how much we can put invest in that statement.
Mhm.
But Davis did talk a lot about wanting to be in community, and engage with the immigrant community in direct conversations with them, and how they need to be supported, and looking at infrastructure to really figure out how to support our local immigrant community, which I appreciated hearing that. That's certainly something that is not happening now
Mhm.
from the mayor's office. There is no engagement with the immigrant community. Davis also mentioned potentially, raising the conversation up to the state attorney general, and exploring ways to create a statewide, what he called legal standard for to bolster the city's legal standing. So he didn't say a statewide separation ordinance, but of course, that's where my mind goes as a member of the Unidos Sanctuary City Committee. Yeah.
No, that's great, and I think you covered it very clearly. I also, I mean, when anyone is running for office, some statements could be made and some promises can be made, but you almost wonder, like, can we hold you to that? Is that actually, and even if we can hold them to it, can it actually happen? Right? I think you're right to even question just how much pressure can anyone put
Mhm.
on a police department in terms of like terminations and how to handle that employment aspect.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, even with our strong mayor kind of setup, I don't actually know like how much power they have to terminate an officer from the police force at
Mhm.
this time.
Right. Sophie, did you have any thoughts on this conversation?
I do. I'm actually surprised because I also heard, similar to Callie, I heard Fate saying that comment about firing a police officer that would be, collaborating with ICE. But he must know that that's harder to do. And I wonder if that was a strategic answer, because there's no right, like there's no way to actually like understand how that would work. And I know that he probably knows that, you know. And so, and another comment, I guess, that I thought was really interesting, he made a comment about Unidos being more involved in active sort of escalation efforts, and you know, being kind of like like the entity that sort of in some way or shape or form contains that activity, right? And I don't know, I don't know how that would work. I think Unidos is kind of in that intersection of, we are working directly with immigration, you know, whether reform or trying to be there for immigration folks. And I wonder, I thought that was a question that I didn't understand. Like, in what capacity is he thinking? Like, what is he imagining that being? Um, and that was one of the questions that I wanted to clarify with him. So I don't know. I feel like I confused what that comment was about.
I agree because it almost like gave more thought than clarity, right? So I mean, it's like, okay, let's pursue
Yeah.
that statement. If you know, we see candidate Fateh potentially as, you know, future mayor of
Mhm.
uh, Minneapolis. So, Callie, you going to say something here?
I agree. I want to pick up on what Sophie said also, that was Fateh that mentioned sort of the community maybe wants trusts Unidos a little more.
Mhm.
Uh, and I agree with that statement that the community might feel better about interacting with members from Unidos than members of the MPD. But that sure, I don't, that doesn't mean that Unidos should be doing the work of any other sort of city officials unless,
Mhm.
you know, there's some sort of agreement put in place, which
Exactly.
yeah, how will that be done? It was that, I think that was one of the challenges, that that's one of the challenges we face with politicians who are running campaigns in general, right? Is that
Mhm.
they can say whatever they want to say that they think will get people excited about the potential
Mhm.
of having them in the office. Whether or not it actually happens or can't is possible, and
Mhm.
is another
Yeah.
story. And go ahead, Sophie. I don't know if you.
And I guess just to piggyback of what you're saying, Callie, one of the thoughts that I had is like, does he understand what Unidos does? That was something that I felt like we could have maybe had a little bit more of a conversation. Like, do you know what we're actively doing in our communities? And if you don't, again, like, this is a great moment to kind of collaborate in a way that we can both have the resources and also understand what, like, what this, how we could be more of service, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, I thought that's what I thought, essentially, like, in a nutshell.
I love that. Any final thoughts, Sophie or Callie?
I'll say that while we're kind of, you know, we're kind of digging into these answers and we're really being, you know, kind of dissecting them, I will say that I left that event feeling very inspired and excited at the potential that this election brings. And I know it's going to be a it's going to be a hard, long fight. And then there will be another long, hard fight beyond that. But I think being together in community in that way,
Mhm.
and engaging with the candidates in that way, helped me feel like it's possible. And that's one thing that the candidates
Mm.
did say in their kind of closing remarks, that, you know, they almost banded together and they said, rank us three. And
Mhm.
uh, and and there it can be better. There isn't another option. So that's where I'll stop. What about you, Sophie?
I love that, and
Mhm.
I'll phrase it just so that you get kind of the same prompt as Callie had.
Mhm.
Really, after hearing these candidates, what gives you hope? What did you hear that kind of brought you to a positive
Mhm.
moment there?
Yeah, I think what really excited me is that they were in union, that whatever is happening isn't working. And it's not working for a lot of people. And so I thought that there was a little bit, like there was a silver lining in the fact that we are talking about these sort of hard questions, and these topics and these issues. And like Hallie said, it's a hard fight and it will be hard for a while, but you know what? It's okay because at least we can acknowledge what isn't working and really start kind of digging into what we want the future of Minneapolis to look like. And so I think this is the start. And I'm just excited that we're having these conversations. And I'm sure there will be more to come. But I'm just the acknowledgement that this isn't working for so many people.
That's right. That's right. No. Oh, Callie.
I just said I agree with you on that, and hopefully we can widen the audience that joins that conversation with us.
Absolutely.
I think that brings it back to just even Unidos Minnesota and our vision, really, right? And we're out there trying to change conditions, right? We're out there organizing a multiracial democracy. We're wanting to make sure that we are building a multi generational base so that we could tackle uh, topics, areas like climate justice, areas like immigration, and bring dignity in justice and equity into these spaces. And I mean, I think that I also just, from what I heard, both of you, you saw glimmers of that even in these candidates. And like Callie, I think I also really got a little excited in that kind of unity that the three of them kind of had in their closing remarks,
Mhm.
when they said, these are the three candidates. If you need to rank us, rank these three candidates. There's something there, and I think that they know that there's power even in that alliance, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Well, thank you, Callie. Thank you, Sophie. To our audience, thank you all for just joining us for this brief conversation. We just wanted to kind of really dig into those Unidos Minnesota questions that had been made. But stay tuned into Unidos Minnesota as we continue to hold leaders accountable and organize for the Minneapolis our families deserve. Thank you all so much. And mis amigos, si todavía están escuchando aquí en español, vamos a estar sintonizándonos la próxima semana con un programa especial en vivo y vamos a estar hablando con miembros de nuestra comunidad la próxima semana acerca del foro del pueblo y cuáles fueron algunas de las impresiones que tuvieron nuestra gente en el foro del pueblo. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Callie. Thank you, Sophie. And
Bye. See you next
audience,
time.
take
Thank
care.